In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where death whispers through every shadow, and trust is a luxury few can afford, General Marcus Kane learned that survival sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. What began as a routine reconnaissance mission would transform into a deadly game of cat and mouse, where 6 highly trained assassins would hunt one man through treacherous terrain. But they never counted on the ghost in the mountains, a mysterious sniper whose identity would shock everyone, including the general himself. This is the true story of how one woman's incredible marksmanship skills turned the tide of what should have been an impossible situation. It's a tale of betrayal, survival, and the extraordinary bond forged in the crucible of combat. When all seemed lost and death circled like vultures overhead, precision met desperation, in ways that would be remembered for generations. The mountains hold many secrets, but none more dangerous than the one about to unfold. General Marcus Kane had seen enough war to know when something felt wrong. The morning air in the Afghan mountains carried an unusual stillness that made the veteran soldier's instincts scream warnings. At 52 years old, Kane had survived 3 tours of duty and countless operations that would have broken lesser men. His weathered face bore the scars of shrapnel, and his grey eyes held the wisdom that comes from dancing with death more times than he cared to remember. The reconnaissance mission seemed straightforward enough on paper. Intelligence suggested that a high-value target was operating from a compound deep in the mountainous region near the Pakistan border. Kane's job was simple: verify the target's presence and coordinate with the strike team for elimination. What should have been a routine 3-day operation in familiar territory had taken an unexpected turn when his communications went dark 12 hours earlier. Kane adjusted his tactical vest and checked his M4 carbine for the 100th time that morning. His team of 8 elite soldiers had been reduced to just him after a devastating ambush the previous night. The memory of watching his men fall one by one burned in his mind like acid. Someone had known their exact route, their timing, even their contingency plans. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound he had ever sustained. The treacherous mountain paths offered little comfort as Kane made his way through the rocky terrain. Each step required careful consideration, as loose stones could trigger an avalanche or alert enemies to his position. The elevation made breathing difficult, and the thin air seemed to amplify every sound. His military boots found purchase on the narrow ledges as he navigated the ancient trails that had been used by warriors and smugglers for centuries. Behind him, somewhere in the maze of valleys and peaks, 6 of the deadliest operatives money could buy were closing in. Kane had caught glimpses of them during his escape from the ambush site. They moved with the fluid grace of professionals, each one a killing machine trained in multiple forms of combat. These weren't ordinary soldiers or local militia fighters. These men had received the same elite training that Kane himself had undergone years earlier. The realization that former allies might be hunting him added another layer of complexity to his desperate situation. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape. Kane paused behind a cluster of boulders to study the terrain ahead. The path split into 3 directions, each offering its own set of challenges and potential escape routes. To the left, a narrow ridge led toward higher elevation, but would leave him exposed to sniper fire. The middle route descended into a valley filled with caves and hidden passages, perfect for ambushes. The rightward path wound around the mountain face, offering some cover but requiring him to traverse several open areas. His radio crackled with static, offering no hope of communication with headquarters. The enemy had effectively cut off all his support systems, leaving him isolated in hostile territory with limited ammunition and supplies. Kane's training kicked in as he began to assess his resources. 2 spare magazines for his rifle, a sidearm with 1 additional clip, basic survival gear, and enough water for maybe 2 days if he rationed carefully. Against 6 professional killers, the odds seemed impossible. As Kane studied his options, movement caught his eye nearly 1,000 yards away. Through his binoculars, he could make out 3 figures moving with military precision along a parallel ridge. They had flanked him while he thought he was being clever. The realization sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air. These hunters knew their business, and they were systematically closing off his escape routes. The general's mind raced through possible strategies. Direct confrontation was suicide against such overwhelming odds. His only advantage lay in his intimate knowledge of this particular mountain range, gained through years of operations in the region. Every cave, every hidden path, every defensible position was catalogued in his memory. If he could reach the old Soviet outpost about 10 miles northeast, he might find defensible positions and perhaps working communications equipment. Kane began moving again, choosing the middle route despite its dangers. The caves would provide concealment, and the rocky terrain might slow down his pursuers. Each step was calculated to minimize noise and avoid leaving obvious tracks. His military training had taught him to think like prey when necessary, to use the environment as both shield and weapon. The mountains themselves would become his allies if he played the game correctly. The first shot rang out just as Kane reached the mouth of a narrow canyon. The bullet struck the rock face inches from his head, sending sharp fragments cutting across his cheek. He dove for cover as more shots followed, the sound of high-powered rifles echoing off the canyon walls. His pursuers had found him sooner than expected, and now the deadly game had officially begun. From his position behind a fallen boulder, Kane could see muzzle flashes from at least 3 different positions. The shots were precise, calculated to drive him deeper into the canyon rather than kill him outright. They wanted him alive, which meant this wasn't just about elimination. Someone wanted information, and they needed him breathing to get it. This realization changed everything about his tactical approach. Kane returned fire in controlled bursts, not expecting to hit anything but hoping to disrupt their coordinated assault. His shots echoed through the canyon like thunder, punctuated by the whine of bullets ricocheting off stone. He began moving deeper into the canyon, using the irregular rock formations as cover, while his mind worked through the implications of being taken alive. The canyon stretched ahead like a stone corridor carved by ancient waters. High walls on both sides created natural choke points that could work for or against him depending on positioning. Kane's knowledge of the area told him that this particular canyon had multiple exit points, including several caves that connected to underground passages. If he could reach the network of tunnels, he might be able to emerge miles away from his current position. Another volley of shots forced Kane to abandon his current position and sprint toward a cluster of large rocks about 50 yards ahead. The bullets came uncomfortably close enough that he could feel the pressure waves as they passed. His pursuers were skilled marksmen, probably military trained, and they were using his desire to escape to herd him exactly where they wanted him to go. As Kane reached his new position, he caught sight of movement on the canyon rim high above. At least 2 of his hunters had gained elevated positions while the others maintained pressure from behind. The trap was closing with professional efficiency, and Kane found himself facing the very real possibility that his long military career might end in this remote canyon far from home. The sound of falling rocks from above made Kane look up just in time to see a figure rappelling down the canyon wall. The man moved with spider-like agility, his weapon trained on Kane's position while he descended. This wasn't just a pursuit anymore. It was a full-scale military operation designed to capture one man alive. Kane realized that whoever wanted him had invested significant resources in making sure he didn't escape. Fighting against trained professionals in their chosen environment, cut off from support, with limited ammunition and no backup plan, General Marcus Kane faced the longest odds of his military career. The mountains that had once been his sanctuary now threatened to become his tomb. But somewhere in the maze of stone and shadow, an unknown guardian angel was about to change everything. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every skill Kane had learned in his decades of service. 6 against 1, with the stakes higher than anyone yet realized. In the unforgiving terrain of the Afghan mountains, where death lurked around every corner and trust was a luxury few could afford, the most dangerous game of all was about to begin. As the sun climbed higher and the shadows grew shorter, Kane prepared himself for what might be his final battle. The enemy had superior numbers, better positioning, and the advantage of coordination, but they had made one critical error in their calculations. They had underestimated the resourcefulness of a desperate soldier fighting for his life. The hunter was about to become the hunted, though none of them knew it yet. High above the canyon, unseen and unknown, someone was watching through a telescopic sight, waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. The mysterious sniper who would change everything was already in position, finger on the trigger, ready to demonstrate skills that would leave even hardened veterans speechless. Kane checked his ammunition one more time and prepared to make his move. The real battle was just beginning. The repelling figure reached the canyon floor with practiced silence, his boots finding purchase on the rocky ground without disturbing so much as a pebble. Kane could see the man clearly now through gaps in the rock formation that sheltered him. The operative wore no identifying insignia, but his gear was top-tier military grade. Night vision goggles hung around his neck, and his rifle was fitted with advanced optics that probably cost more than most soldiers made in a year. Kane counted at least 4 distinct shooting positions now, with the new arrival making 5 confirmed hostiles. The 6th member of the hunting party remained unaccounted for, which meant Kane had to assume threat from any direction. His military training had taught him that the enemy you couldn't see was always the most dangerous one. The unseen 6th man could be anywhere, perhaps already moving to cut off Kane's retreat through the canyon's rear exit. The tactical situation continued to deteriorate with each passing minute. Kane's position behind the boulder cluster provided temporary concealment but offered no long-term defensive advantages. His ammunition situation remained critical and every shot had to count. More importantly, he needed to start thinking several moves ahead if he hoped to survive the next hour, let alone escape entirely. A sharp whistle echoed off the canyon walls, clearly a communication signal between the hunting team. Kane recognized the pattern as military field communication, the kind used when radio silence was essential. These men had worked together before, probably many times. Their coordination suggested months or years of joint operations, making them exponentially more dangerous than 6 individuals acting independently. Kane studied the canyon geography with renewed intensity, looking for any advantage he might exploit. The ancient waterway that had carved this passage through solid rock had left behind several interesting features. About 200 yards deeper into the canyon, the passage narrowed considerably before opening into a wider chamber. If Kane could reach that bottleneck, he might be able to create a defensible position that would force his pursuers to approach from only one direction. Another signal whistle, this time from a different direction, indicated the hunting party was repositioning. Kane caught glimpses of movement as figures shifted between cover points with military precision. They were tightening the noose methodically, probably working from a predetermined plan that accounted for multiple contingencies. Someone had spent considerable time studying this canyon and mapping out optimal approach routes. The sun's angle was changing, and Kane realized that the shadows that currently provided his concealment would shift within the hour. His temporary sanctuary would become a death trap if he remained stationary much longer. The decision to move or stay could determine whether he lived or died, but both options carried enormous risks. Moving would expose him to concentrated fire from multiple positions, while staying put would eventually leave him helpless when the shadows disappeared. Kane made his choice. Staying meant certain death or capture, while movement at least offered the possibility of reaching better defensive terrain. He began preparing for what would essentially be a controlled retreat, under fire, one of the most dangerous maneuvers in military tactics. Success would depend on timing, speed, and a considerable amount of luck. The general took a deep breath and exploded from cover, sprinting toward the next cluster of boulders while bullets immediately began striking the ground around his feet. The shooters had been ready for his move, confirming that they understood military tactics as well as he did. Kane dove and rolled behind his new position as rock fragments showered down from multiple impact points just inches above his head. From this new vantage point, Kane could see that his pursuers had indeed been repositioning during his period of concealment. 2 figures were now visible on the canyon rim, while at least 2 more had moved to elevated positions on rock ledges along the canyon walls. The crossfire pattern they had established was textbook military strategy. Any movement in the open would be met with overlapping fields of fire from multiple angles. Kane's radio suddenly crackled to life, startling him with an unexpected transmission. A calm male voice spoke with what sounded like an American accent. "General Kane, this is Colonel Stevens. You are ordered to surrender immediately for debriefing. You will not be harmed if you comply." The transmission raised more questions than it answered. Kane recognized neither the voice nor the name, and the fact that his radio was receiving signals suggested his communications blackout had been deliberate rather than due to equipment failure. Someone had been controlling his ability to call for help while positioning their hunting party for maximum effectiveness. "Negative," Kane responded into his radio. "I require authentication codes and verification of orders through proper channels." The response came immediately. "General, you are in no position to make demands. You have classified information that requires immediate, secure debriefing. Surrender now and this situation can be resolved without further bloodshed." Kane's instincts screamed that this entire scenario was wrong on multiple levels. Legitimate military operations didn't involve hunting down American generals in foreign mountains with unmarked operatives. The classified information reference confirmed his suspicion that this was about more than just eliminating a witness to the previous night's ambush. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Colonel," Kane replied. "Perhaps you could explain how 6 unmarked hostiles hunting an American general constitutes proper military procedure." The radio went silent for several long moments before Stevens responded, "You have 30 seconds to reconsider, General. After that, we cannot guarantee your safety during extraction." Kane used those 30 seconds to study the canyon walls more carefully. The ancient stone showed clear evidence of geological instability in several places, including a section of overhanging rock about 300 yards ahead that looked particularly precarious. If he could reach that area and create the right kind of disturbance, he might be able to change the tactical situation dramatically. The 30-second deadline passed without response from Kane, and immediately the shooting resumed with increased intensity. This time, however, the pattern had changed. Instead of trying to hurt him deeper into the canyon, the shots were designed to pin him down in his current position. Kane realized that ground forces were probably moving to surround him, while the elevated shooters kept him suppressed. A new sound reached Kane's ears, the distinctive whine of an incoming drone. Looking up, he could see a small, unmanned aircraft circling high above the canyon. The device was undoubtedly equipped with cameras and possibly weapons, adding another layer of complexity to his tactical situation. His enemies now had real-time aerial surveillance and could track his movements even if he managed to break visual contact with the ground forces. Kane was running out of options rapidly. The combination of aerial surveillance, elevated shooting positions, and coordinating ground forces created an almost impossible tactical puzzle. His ammunition was dwindling, his cover was temporary at best, and his enemies seemed to know his location at all times. The professional nature of the operation suggested resources far beyond what normal military units could deploy for a single target. The radio crackled again. "General Kane, aerial reconnaissance shows your position is compromised. You have no viable escape routes remaining. Surrender now and avoid unnecessary casualties." For the first time since the pursuit began, Kane began to consider the possibility that he might not survive this encounter. The hunting party had demonstrated professional competence, superior resources, and what appeared to be unlimited backing. His own military career, impressive as it was, might not be enough to overcome such overwhelming odds. But General Marcus Kane hadn't survived 3 tours of duty by giving up when things looked impossible. He had built his reputation on finding solutions when none seemed to exist, on turning desperate situations into victories through a combination of tactics, determination, and calculated risks. This situation would test all of those skills to their absolute limits. Kane began moving again, this time using a series of short sprints between cover points to work his way toward the unstable rock formation he had identified earlier. Each movement drew immediate fire, forcing him to time his advances carefully to avoid the coordinated shooting pattern his pursuers had established. The drone overhead tracked his progress, making stealth impossible but also potentially creating an opportunity he could exploit. As Kane reached a position about 50 yards from the geological weak point he had identified, something unexpected happened. A single rifle shot rang out from somewhere high above the canyon, followed immediately by the sound of the surveillance drone crashing into the canyon wall. The aircraft exploded in a shower of sparks and debris, eliminating the aerial advantage his pursuers had enjoyed. The 6 hunters immediately began scanning the canyon rims and distant peaks, clearly surprised by this development. Someone else had entered the game, and that someone possessed both excellent marksmanship skills and a high-powered rifle. Kane felt a surge of hope for the first time since his ordeal began. He wasn't alone anymore. Another shot echoed across the canyon, this time followed by a scream of pain from one of the elevated positions. Kane could see that one of his pursuers had been hit. Though the man was still moving and appeared to be receiving aid from his companions, the mysterious sniper was clearly engaging the hunting party, but from such a distance that Kane couldn't even see muzzle flashes. The tactical situation had suddenly become far more complex for everyone involved. Kane's pursuers now faced threats from 2 directions and had lost their aerial surveillance capability. But Kane himself still didn't know the identity or intentions of his unexpected ally. In the treacherous world of military operations, the enemy of your enemy wasn't necessarily your friend. Kane decided to use the confusion created by the sniper's intervention to make his move toward the unstable rock formation. If his calculations were correct, he might be able to bring down enough stone to create both cover and chaos, potentially evening the odds significantly. The risk was enormous. If he miscalculated, he could bring the entire canyon wall down on his own position. As bullets continued to fly from multiple directions, and the sound of precision rifle shots echoed off the canyon walls, Kane prepared to make the most desperate gambit of his military career. The mysterious sniper had given him an opportunity, and he intended to make the most of it. The hunter had become the hunted, but the game was far from over. High above the chaos, unseen and unknown, the guardian angel continued to work with deadly precision. Each shot was calculated not just for accuracy, but for maximum psychological impact on the hunting party. The 6 foes who had seemed so confident in their overwhelming advantages were beginning to understand that they were no longer the only predators in these mountains. The real battle was just beginning. Kane reached the base of the unstable rock formation just as another precision shot rang out from the mysterious sniper's position. This time, the bullet found its mark with devastating effect. One of the hunters on the canyon rim jerked backward and disappeared from sight, his rifle clattering down the rock face to land with a metallic crash on the canyon floor. The remaining members of the hunting party immediately sought deeper cover, their previous confidence shaken by the sudden loss of two team members. The general could hear urgent voices calling out tactical commands, in what sounded like a mixture of English and another language he couldn't identify. The professional coordination that had made his pursuers so dangerous was beginning to break down under pressure from an unexpected threat they couldn't locate or neutralize. Kane recognized the psychological impact of sniper fire on even experienced soldiers. The knowledge that death could come from an invisible enemy at any moment was mentally devastating. Kane studied the rock formation above him with the eye of someone who had spent years learning to read geological structures. The overhang consisted of several massive stone blocks held in place by centuries of natural cementing and gravitational balance. A properly placed explosive charge could bring down tons of rock, but Kane had no explosives. His only option was to use his remaining ammunition to strike the formation's weakest points and hope that physics would do the rest. Another rifle shot echoed across the mountains, followed immediately by a cry of alarm from somewhere above. Kane couldn't see what had happened, but the increasing desperation in the voices of his pursuers suggested the mysterious sniper was systematically eliminating their tactical advantages. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, targeting not just personnel but equipment and positioning that gave the hunting party their superiority. The radio crackled again with Colonel Stevens' voice, but this time the calm control was replaced by obvious frustration. All units, we have an unknown sniper engaging from long range. Estimate distance over 1,000 meters. Take evasive action and maintain pursuit of primary target. 1,000 meters. Kane was impressed despite his desperate situation. That was an extremely difficult shot under ideal conditions. And the mysterious sniper was making multiple successful hits in challenging mountain terrain with variable wind conditions. Whoever was helping him possessed skills that bordered on the superhuman. Kane positioned himself carefully and began firing controlled shots at the geological weak points he had identified. His first shot struck a section where two massive blocks joined, sending a shower of stone fragments cascading down. The impact point showed promising cracks, but the formation remained stable. He adjusted his aim and fired again, this time targeting a different stress point where water erosion had already begun to compromise the rock's integrity. The third shot produced the result Kane had hoped for. A deep rumbling sound came from above as the ancient stone finally surrendered to the forces that had been working against it for millennia. The massive overhang shuddered, tilted, and then came crashing down with earth-shaking force. Tons of rock thundered into the canyon, creating an instant barrier between Kane and most of his pursuers while filling the air with choking dust and debris. When the dust began to settle, Kane found himself on the far side of a pile of rubble that effectively blocked the canyon passage. He could hear voices and movement from the other side, but the immediate threat of crossfire from multiple positions had been eliminated. The rockfall had also created numerous hiding places and defensive positions among the jumbled stones, giving Kane options he hadn't possessed minutes earlier. But Kane's satisfaction was short-lived. The radio transmission he heard next confirmed his fears. Beta team, proceed to flanking position Alpha. 7. Primary target is now isolated on the far side of the rockfall. Maintain surveillance and prevent escape while we find alternate routes. At least two members of the hunting party had been positioned outside the canyon to prevent exactly the kind of escape Kane was now attempting. The rockfall had bought him time and tactical advantages, but it hadn't eliminated the threat entirely. He was still being hunted by professionals who had planned for multiple contingencies. Kane began moving through the jumbled rocks, using the irregular terrain to mask his movements while working toward the rear of the canyon. The mysterious sniper was still active, as evidenced by another distant shot that echoed off the mountain walls. Each shot seemed calculated to disrupt the hunting party's attempts to coordinate and reposition, buying Kane precious time to reach more defensible terrain. As Kane navigated through the rocky maze, he caught sight of something that made him pause. A glint of sunlight reflected off metal high on a distant ridge, nearly 2 miles away by his estimate. Through his binoculars, he could just make out the outline of what appeared to be a sniper's position. The distance was incredible, far beyond what most military snipers would attempt under battlefield conditions. The mysterious guardian angel fired again, and this time Kane was watching. The muzzle flash was barely visible even through his binoculars, but the shot's impact was immediate. One of the voices Kane had been hearing from beyond the rockfall suddenly stopped mid-sentence, followed by urgent calls for medical attention. The unknown sniper had just eliminated another member of the hunting party with a shot that defied conventional military wisdom. Kane's radio came alive with increasingly frantic transmissions. Base. This is Colonel Stevens. We have multiple casualties from long-range sniper fire. Unknown shooter is engaging from extreme distance with precision accuracy. Request immediate aerial support and additional ground units. The response was immediate. Stevens, maintain radio silence until secure frequency is established. Unknown parties may be monitoring communications. Proceed with primary mission using standard protocols. The exchange revealed several important pieces of information to Kane. First, his pursuers were operating under someone's direct authority, confirming this wasn't a rogue operation. Second, they were concerned about communication security, suggesting they had something to hide. Third, the mysterious sniper was having enough impact to force them to request reinforcements. Kane reached the rear of the canyon and found himself facing a narrow passage that led deeper into the mountain. His knowledge of the area told him this route would eventually connect to a network of caves and tunnels, but it also meant leaving the relative openness of the canyon for confined spaces where different tactical rules applied. The decision to enter the tunnel system would limit his movement options while potentially offering concealment from both aerial surveillance and long-range observation. Before committing to the underground route, Kane took one last look at the distant ridge where he had spotted the sniper's position. Through his binoculars, he could see what appeared to be a figure moving among the rocks, repositioning for another shot. The person was too far away to make out any details, but something about the movement pattern seemed unusual, more fluid and graceful than the typically rigid posture of military-trained snipers. Another shot rang out across the mountains, this time followed by the sound of something metallic crashing against rock. Kane realized the sniper was now targeting equipment rather than personnel, systematically eliminating the technological advantages his pursuers possessed. First the drone, now apparently some other piece of electronic gear. The mysterious marksman understood not just precision shooting but tactical priorities. Kane made his decision and entered the tunnel system. The passage was narrow but tall enough to walk upright, carved by centuries of water flow through limestone. His flashlight revealed smooth walls marked by mineral deposits and the occasional ancient carving left by previous travelers. The air was cool and damp, a welcome relief from the intense heat and stress of the canyon battle. As Kane moved deeper into the mountain, he could hear the muffled sounds of his pursuers attempting to clear the rockfall or find alternate routes. The voices were becoming more distant, suggesting he was successfully breaking contact with the immediate threat. But Kane knew that professionals like these would have studied maps of the area and would eventually figure out where the tunnel system emerged. The radio crackled with static and broken transmissions as the rock overhead interfered with communications. Kane caught fragments of conversation that suggested increasing frustration and confusion among the hunting party. The mysterious sniper's intervention had disrupted their carefully planned operation and forced them into reactive mode rather than maintaining the initiative. Kane paused at a junction where the tunnel split into 3 different passages. His mental map of the area suggested the leftward path would emerge near an old Soviet observation post about 3 miles away. The center passage led to a series of caves that opened onto a valley on the mountain's far side. The right passage descended deeper underground before eventually connecting to a network of natural caverns that could provide concealment for days if necessary. The decision would depend on Kane's assessment of his pursuers' likely responses and capabilities. The Soviet post offered the possibility of defensible positions and perhaps working communications, but it was also the most obvious destination for someone with Kane's background and knowledge. The valley exit would get him out of the immediate area but would leave him exposed in open terrain where aerial surveillance could easily track his movements. Kane chose the deeper cave system, reasoning that his immediate priority should be breaking contact entirely rather than trying to establish defensive positions. The hunting party had demonstrated resources and coordination that suggested they could call in additional support at any time. His best chance lay in disappearing completely until he could figure out who was behind the operation and why they wanted him alive. As Kane descended into the deeper caves, following passages carved by underground streams over geological time periods, he reflected on the mysterious sniper who had intervened at the crucial moment. The precision demonstrated was extraordinary, but more than that, the tactical understanding shown in target selection revealed military training of the highest caliber. Someone with those skills didn't end up positioned perfectly to help a hunted general by coincidence. The cave system opened into a larger chamber where Kane's flashlight revealed evidence of previous human habitation. Ancient fire pits, carved niches for storage, and symbols painted on walls suggested this place had served as shelter for centuries. More recently, someone had left modern supplies, water containers, preserved food, and what appeared to be medical supplies stored in waterproof containers. Kane's military training made him suspicious of convenient supply caches, but his practical situation left him little choice but to investigate. The water containers were sealed and appeared untampered with, and the food supplies bore recent dates. Someone had been using this cave system regularly, and recently enough that the supplies were still viable. As Kane examined the cache supplies more closely, he found something that made him freeze. Nestled among the medical supplies was a military-issue radio with frequency settings that matched his own equipment. Beside it was a handwritten note that simply read, "General Kane. If you're reading this, follow the main passage for 2 miles until you reach the chamber with 3 exits. Take the middle passage and wait. Help is coming. S." The implications hit Kane like a physical blow. Someone had known he would end up in this exact location, had prepared for his arrival, and had been tracking his movements well enough to predict his route through the cave system. The mysterious sniper wasn't just a fortunate coincidence. This entire scenario had been anticipated and planned for. Kane's radio suddenly came alive with a clear, strong signal. "General Kane, this is Sierra. Please respond if you're receiving this transmission." The voice was different from Colonel Stevens, and definitely different from any of his pursuers. More importantly, it was a woman's voice, calm and professional, with what sounded like a slight southern accent. Kane hesitated for a moment before responding. "Sierra, this is Kane. I'm receiving you clearly. Who are you, and how did you know where to find me?" The response came immediately. "General, I'm the one who's been keeping those 6 hostiles off your back. We need to move quickly before they figure out the cave system. Can you reach the chamber with 3 exits?" Kane looked at the note again, then at the radio, then at the supplies that had been placed exactly where he would need them. Someone had orchestrated this entire sequence of events, and now that someone was reaching out directly. In his desperate situation, Kane had to decide whether to trust a mysterious woman who claimed to be his guardian angel sniper. The sound of distant voices echoing through the cave passages made the decision for him. His pursuers had found the tunnel entrance and were beginning their search. Kane grabbed the cached supplies and headed deeper into the mountain, following the directions left by someone who knew far more about his situation than seemed possible. The game had taken another unexpected turn, and Kane was beginning to realize that nothing about this day was what it seemed to be. Kane moved through the underground passages with a renewed urgency, the sound of his pursuers echoing behind him through the limestone corridors. The cache supplies had given him fresh water and energy bars, but more importantly, they had given him hope that someone was actively working to keep him alive. The radio maintained intermittent contact with the mysterious Sierra, though the stone overhead frequently blocked transmissions. The cave system was more extensive than Kane had initially realized. Ancient water flow had carved multiple levels and branching passages through the mountain, creating a 3-dimensional maze that would challenge even experienced spelunkers. Kane's military training included basic cave navigation, but he found himself relying heavily on the directions left in the note and Sierra's radio guidance to avoid getting lost in the underground labyrinth. After nearly an hour of steady movement through increasingly narrow passages, Kane reached the chamber Sierra had described. The space opened dramatically from the confining tunnel into a cavern large enough to house a small building. 3 distinct passages led away from the chamber at different elevations, each carved by separate water sources over countless centuries. Kane's flashlight revealed more evidence of recent human activity, footprints in the dust and what appeared to be observation equipment positioned to watch all 3 exits. "Sierra, I've reached the chamber," Kane reported into the radio. "Which passage do I take?" The response came clearly this time. "General, take the middle passage and go approximately 100 meters until you reach a natural alcove on your right. Wait there and maintain radio silence until I give you the all-clear signal." Kane found the alcove exactly where Sierra had indicated. The natural formation provided excellent concealment while offering a clear view of the passage in both directions. More importantly, it had been prepared as a defensive position. Someone had placed loose rocks to create a barricade and had positioned supplies, including additional ammunition for Kane's rifle. The level of preparation suggested long-term planning rather than hasty improvisation. As Kane settled into the prepared position, he heard voices echoing from the main chamber. His pursuers had reached the 3-way junction and were apparently debating which route to follow. The acoustics of the cave system made their conversation clearly audible despite the distance. "Beta team takes the upper passage, Charlie team takes the lower," came Colonel Stevens' voice. "Alpha team follows the middle passage. Radio contact every 15 minutes. If you encounter the target, take him alive if possible, but don't take unnecessary risks." Kane realized that splitting their forces was both a tactical necessity and a potential vulnerability. While it allowed the hunting party to search all 3 passages simultaneously, it also reduced the overwhelming numerical advantage they had maintained throughout the pursuit. If Sierra was positioned correctly, she might be able to engage the divided forces separately, rather than facing all 6 remaining hostiles at once. The radio crackled softly. "General, I have eyes on your position. 3 hostiles are approaching your passage. 2 more have taken the upper route. 1 has gone down. When I give the word, you'll have approximately 30 seconds to reach the next waypoint. Acknowledge." Kane keyed his radio once in acknowledgement, not wanting to risk voice transmission that might be overheard. The tactical situation was about to become very interesting. Sierra apparently had overwatch capability that allowed her to track all the hostile forces while remaining undetected herself. That level of observation usually required multiple people or sophisticated equipment. The sound of approaching footsteps made Kane tense in his concealed position. Through a gap in the rock barricade, he could see the beam of a tactical flashlight sweeping the passage ahead of the advancing team. The 3 men moved with professional caution, checking potential hiding spots while maintaining mutual support. Kane recognized their movement pattern as standard military small unit tactics. "Now!" came Sierra's whispered command through the radio. Immediately, the cave system erupted with the sound of high-powered rifle fire. The shots came from multiple directions and seemed to be engaging targets in all 3 passages simultaneously. Kane heard shouts of alarm and return fire from various positions throughout the cave network. Sierra wasn't just one sniper. She had somehow established multiple firing positions that allowed her to engage the separated elements of the hunting party. Kane used the confusion to move from his concealed position, following Sierra's directions toward the next waypoint deeper in the cave system. As he moved, he could hear the tactical situation deteriorating for his pursuers. The voices that had been confident and coordinated now carried notes of panic and confusion. Someone was systematically dismantling their professional composure. "All units, fall back to the main chamber," Stevens commanded over the radio. "We're taking casualties from multiple positions. Unknown number of hostiles with superior cave knowledge." Kane reached the next waypoint, another prepared position that offered both concealment and multiple escape routes. The radio crackled. "General, hold position for 2 minutes, then follow the passage marked with white chalk arrows. Your destination is approximately 400 meters ahead." For the first time since the ordeal began, Kane had a moment to really consider his situation. Someone named Sierra had anticipated his route through the mountain, prepared multiple defensive positions, and was now systematically engaging 6 professional soldiers with apparent success. The level of preparation and tactical sophistication suggested this wasn't a chance encounter or lucky intervention. Someone had been planning for this exact scenario. The radio came alive again, this time with a transmission that wasn't directed at Kane. "Control, this is Stevens. Primary mission is compromised. We have encountered prepared resistance with superior positioning and local knowledge. Request immediate extraction and air support." The response was immediate and cold. "Negative, Stevens. Primary mission remains in effect. Target must be secured. Failure is not acceptable." Kane realized he was listening to communications between his pursuers and their command authority. The exchange revealed that this operation had significant backing and that whoever was directing it considered Kane's capture essential enough to sacrifice the hunting party if necessary. The knowledge that he possessed must be extraordinarily valuable or dangerous. Sierra's voice returned to his radio. "General, it's time to move. Follow the chalk arrows and maintain steady pace. We're going to extract you from this mountain, but timing is critical." Kane began moving again, following barely visible chalk marks that led through passages he never would have found on his own. The route seemed designed to take advantage of the cave system's most confusing aspects while avoiding areas where hostile forces might establish ambush positions. Someone had spent considerable time mapping these caves and planning optimal routes for various scenarios. As Kane progressed through the underground maze, he began to piece together disturbing implications. The level of preparation Sierra had demonstrated required advanced knowledge of both his mission and the likely response to its compromise. That suggested either incredible foresight or inside information about the operation that had gone wrong the previous night. The passage opened into another large chamber, this one showing clear evidence of military occupation. Battery-powered lights illuminated equipment that included communications gear, surveillance monitors, and what appeared to be a small armory. The setup suggested someone had been operating from this location for an extended period. "Welcome to my home away from home, General," came a voice from behind Kane. He spun around to find a woman emerging from a concealed position near the chamber entrance. She was tall and athletically built, with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her clothing was practical tactical gear, and she carried a rifle that Kane recognized as a high-end sniper system worth more than most people's cars. but what struck him most was how familiar she seemed, though he was certain they had never met. "You're Sierra," Kane said, more statement than question. "That's one of my names," she replied with a slight smile. "But you knew me by another name once upon a time."
"Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment."
"I served under your command in Iraq, General."
"You probably don't remember me specifically. You had a lot of soldiers under your command." Kane's memory flashed back to his time with the Rangers, trying to place the name and face. Chen had been one of the first female snipers to serve in direct combat roles, and her skills had been legendary even among the elite Rangers. But she had disappeared from his unit after a classified mission that Kane had never been fully briefed on. "Chen," Kane said slowly, "you were supposedly killed in action during Operation Silent Thunder. I signed the recommendation for your posthumous medal." "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Sarah replied. "Let's just say that certain parties found my particular skill set useful for operations that didn't officially exist. I've been working in the shadows for the past 8 years, General. And when I learned that someone was planning to eliminate you, I couldn't let that happen." Kane studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only professional competence and what appeared to be genuine concern. "How did you know about the operation against me, and how did you prepare all this?" He gestured at the elaborate cave setup. Sarah moved to one of the surveillance monitors and began typing commands. "General, do you remember the classified documents you were asked to review 3 months ago? The ones about Operation Blackwater and the arms deals in Syria?" Kaney's blood ran cold. The documents Sarah referenced were among the most sensitive materials he had ever handled, involving illegal arms sales to rebel groups that had later been linked to terrorist activities. The implications of those documents reaching public attention would destroy careers and potentially bring down entire government departments. "You know about Blackwater?" Kane said. "I know that certain people in very high places are desperate to make sure those documents never see daylight," Sarah replied, "and I know that you're the only person who read them who isn't already under their control. They can't risk you testifying before a congressional committee or talking to journalists." The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place for Kane. The ambush of his team, the professional hunting party, the insistence on taking him alive, it all made sense if powerful people needed to ensure his permanent silence while making it look like enemy action, rather than assassination. Sarah continued, "I've been tracking the planning for this operation for 2 weeks, General. They intended to make your death look like Taliban action, but they needed to capture you first to make sure you hadn't shared the Blackwater information with anyone else." Kane felt a surge of anger at the betrayal by his own government, but also confusion about Sarah's role. "Why are you helping me? What's your interest in keeping me alive?" Sarah's expression hardened. "Because the same people who want you dead were responsible for my supposed death 8 years ago. Operation Silent Thunder wasn't compromised by enemy action, General. It was sacrificed by the same network that's hunting you now. My entire team died because someone in Washington decided we knew too much about their activities." The radio crackled with Stevens' voice. "All units, target has been located in the lower cave system. Converging on position now. Prepare for final assault." Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, shutting down equipment and gathering essential gear. "Time to go, General. They found us sooner than I expected, which means they've got better intelligence on these caves than I thought." Kane grabbed his rifle and prepared to follow Sarah's lead. "Where do we go from here?" "Up," Sarah replied, pointing toward what appeared to be a natural chimney in the cave ceiling. "There's a vertical passage that leads to the surface about 2 miles from here. It's technical climbing, but it's our best shot at avoiding the welcoming committee they've probably positioned at all the normal exits." As they prepared their climbing gear, Kane realized that his desperate situation had become something entirely different. He was no longer just running from assassins, he was part of a larger conflict involving government corruption, illegal arms deals, and shadowy operations that most people would never believe existed. Sarah had transformed from mysterious guardian angel into ally and fellow target. Together they faced enemies with virtually unlimited resources and official backing. But Kane had also gained something invaluable. Someone who understood the true scope of what they were up against and had the skills to fight back. The sound of approaching voices and equipment echoed through the cave passages as the hunting party closed in on their position. Kane and Sarah began their climb toward the surface, toward whatever awaited them in the Afghan mountains above. The game had changed completely, but it was far from over. Behind them, the 6 foes who had seemed so dangerous were about to discover that they had been hunting more than just one rogue general. They had stumbled into a conflict with someone whose precision with a rifle was matched only by her determination to settle old scores with the people who had betrayed her years earlier. The real battle was just beginning. The vertical climb through the natural chimney tested every muscle in Kane's 52-year-old body. Sarah moved above him with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years perfecting technical climbing skills, while Kane relied on decades of military training to push through the physical demands of the ascent. The rock walls were smooth limestone worn by centuries of water flow, offering minimal handholds and requiring careful placement of each climbing anchor. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit echoed up the vertical passage. The hunting party had discovered their escape route faster than Sarah had anticipated, suggesting they possessed detailed intelligence about the cave system.
Kane could hear equipment being deployed and voices coordinating what sounded like a technical rescue operation to follow them up the chimney.
They're climbing faster than expected, Kane called up to Sarah.
I know, she replied, not pausing in her steady upward progress. They've got professional climbing gear and probably night vision. We need to reach the surface and establish defensive positions before they clear the chimney. The climb continued for what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes of steady vertical progress. Kane's shoulders burned from the constant strain, and his fingers were beginning to lose sensitivity from gripping the rough stone. But the prospect of facing 6 professional killers in a confined vertical space provided powerful motivation to keep moving upward. Sarah reached the surface first, quickly establishing security before helping Kane complete the final section of the climb. They emerged through a narrow opening concealed among rocks on a high ridge that offered commanding views of the surrounding mountain terrain. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valleys below, and creating the kind of lighting conditions that favored experienced snipers. Perfect, Sarah said, surveying the tactical situation. We've got excellent fields of fire and multiple escape routes if this position becomes untenable. She immediately began setting up her sniper system, a custom rifle fitted with advanced optics that could engage targets at distances exceeding 2 miles. Kane realized that Sarah's intervention throughout the day had been conducted from positions like this one to elevated, concealed, and offering the kind of sightlines that made precision shooting possible at extreme ranges. The radio crackled with increasingly frantic transmissions from the hunting party. Control, targets have reached surface through vertical passage. We're following, but they have significant head start and superior positioning. Estimate 15 minutes behind them. The response was immediate. Stevens, aerial assets are en route. Maintain pursuit and guide aircraft to target location. This ends tonight. Kane felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Aerial assets meant helicopters or drones, probably both. Even Sarah's extraordinary marksmanship skills would be challenged by fast-moving aircraft equipped with sophisticated sensors and heavy weaponry. Their tactical situation was about to become exponentially more difficult. Sarah, they're calling in air support, Kane warned. She didn't look up from her rifle scope. I heard. How do you feel about making this a very public incident, General? Because that's about to be our only option. Kane considered the implications. A firefight involving American aircraft attacking American personnel on foreign soil would create an international incident impossible to cover up. The people behind this operation had been counting on plausible deniability, the ability to blame Kane's death on enemy action while keeping their involvement secret. What did you have in mind? Kane asked. Sarah smiled grimly. I've been documenting everything that's happened today. Video footage, audio recordings, GPS coordinates, personnel identifications. If this goes public, it exposes the entire network responsible for Blackwater and a lot of other illegal operations. She produced a satellite communication device and began entering commands. I'm uploading everything to multiple news organizations and congressional offices simultaneously. In about 10 minutes, this story is going to be impossible to suppress. The first helicopter appeared on the horizon as Sarah completed her data transmission. The aircraft was a military attack helicopter, probably operating under some kind of classified authority that allowed it to engage American citizens without normal legal constraints. Kane realized that the people behind this operation were willing to risk enormous exposure rather than allow him to testify about what he knew. Sarah tracked the approaching helicopter through her rifle scope. General, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to do is going to change everything. Once I fire on that aircraft, there's no going back to normal military careers for either of us. Kane looked at the helicopter, then at Sarah, then at the narrow cave opening where their pursuers would emerge at any moment. The choice was between accepting death to protect the careers and reputations of people who had betrayed their country, or fighting back with the knowledge that victory would mean becoming permanent fugitives. Take the shot, Kane said. Sarah's rifle spoke with authority. The bullet traveled over a mile to strike the helicopter's tail rotor assembly with surgical precision. The aircraft immediately went into an uncontrolled spin, auto-rotating toward an emergency landing in the valley below. The pilot's skill kept the crash from being fatal, but the helicopter was completely disabled. "One down," Sarah said, already tracking the second aircraft that had appeared behind the first. The radio exploded with emergency transmissions. "Mayday, Mayday, Guardian 1 is down. We are taking precision fire from unknown sniper. Extremely accurate, estimate range over 1 mile." The second helicopter immediately began evasive maneuvers while trying to locate Sarah's position. The pilot was clearly experienced in dealing with ground-based threats and was using terrain features to mask his approach. But Sarah had chosen her position specifically for this kind of engagement. Kane heard sounds from the cave entrance. Their pursuers had reached the surface. "Contact rear," he called out, engaging the first figure to emerge with carefully aimed shots. His military training took over as he established fields of fire that would prevent the hunting party from reaching covered positions. The tactical situation became a three-way engagement, with Kane holding off ground forces, Sarah engaging aerial threats, and multiple radio frequencies broadcasting emergency traffic that was being intercepted by intelligence services around the world. The public exposure Sarah had orchestrated was working exactly as planned. Sarah's second shot disabled the remaining helicopter, this time targeting the main rotor system and forcing another emergency landing. With both aircraft neutralized, the immediate aerial threat was eliminated. But Kane knew that more aircraft would be en route, probably with orders to eliminate all witnesses, regardless of the political consequences. "Sarah, how much ammunition do you have?" Kane called out while engaging another target emerging from the cave. "Enough," she replied, smoothly working the bolt of her rifle. "But we can't hold this position indefinitely. They'll keep sending assets until they overwhelm us through sheer numbers." Kane realized she was right. The people behind this operation had demonstrated willingness to sacrifice multiple aircraft and personnel, rather than allow their secrets to be exposed. They would continue escalating until they achieved their objective or until the situation became so public that continuation was impossible. The radio crackled with a new voice. "General Kane, Staff Sergeant Chen, this is Director Harrison, Central Intelligence Agency. You are both ordered to cease fire and surrender immediately for debriefing." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Director Harrison, I should have known you'd get personally involved. How many of our people have you sacrificed to protect your little empire?" Kane realized that Sarah had recognized the voice, which meant this went to the very top of the intelligence community. The conspiracy they had uncovered wasn't just about arms deals. It involved systematic elimination of American military personnel who discovered inconvenient truths about government operations. "Chen, you were declared dead 8 years ago." Harrison's voice continued. "Your current actions constitute terrorism against the United States government. Surrender now, and we can discuss terms." "The only terms I'm interested in," Sarah replied into the radio, "involve congressional testimony under oath about Operation Silent Thunder, Operation Blackwater, and about 6 other illegal activities you've been covering up." The sound of approaching aircraft made Kane look toward the horizon. At least 4 helicopters were visible in the distance, and they were approaching with obvious hostile intent. The escalation was continuing exactly as Sarah had predicted, and Kane realized they were about to become the center of an international incident. "General," Sarah said, "I need you to make a choice. We can surrender now and hope they honor some kind of deal, or we can make this so public and so messy that they can't make us disappear. But if we choose option 2, we're going to be fugitives for the rest of our lives." Kane looked at the approaching helicopters, then at the evidence of government corruption and betrayal that had led to this moment. He thought about his fallen soldiers, about Sarah's supposedly dead team, about all the others who had been sacrificed to protect the secrets of people like Director Harrison. "I didn't spend 30 years in the army to let corrupt officials murder American soldiers," Kane said. "Let's give them a fight they'll never forget." Sarah smiled and began engaging the approaching aircraft with methodical precision. Her shots were perfectly placed to disable rather than destroy, creating maximum chaos while minimizing casualties. Each aircraft was forced to make emergency landings, creating a growing collection of disabled government assets that would be impossible to explain or cover up. The gunfire continued as more aircraft appeared on the horizon. Sarah's ammunition was running low, but her message had been sent to news organizations around the world. Within hours, the story of 2 American military heroes fighting for their lives against government assassins would dominate international headlines. Kane's radio crackled one final time with Director Harrison's voice. "Stand down immediately or face the consequences." The consequences, Sarah replied, are that the world is about to learn the truth about what you people have been doing. Every news organization on Earth now has the evidence, Director. Your little secret empire just got exposed. As the sun set behind the Afghan mountains, Kane and Sarah continued their desperate fight against overwhelming odds. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing enemies with virtually unlimited resources. But they had achieved something more valuable than tactical victory. They had ensured that the truth would survive even if they didn't. The 6 foes who had started this deadly game lay scattered across the mountainside, their professional competence no match for Sarah's precision marksmanship and Kane's tactical expertise.
The real enemies, the corrupt officials who had orchestrated the entire operation, were about to face a different kind of battle as their secrets became public knowledge.
In the growing darkness of the Afghan mountains, 2 American heroes made their final stand against a government conspiracy that had cost countless lives.
Their victory wouldn't be measured in tactical success, but in the truth they had preserved for the world to see. The mysterious sniper's perfect precision had saved more than just one general's life. It had exposed a network of corruption that had operated in shadows for too long. As night fell and the sound of distant aircraft continued to echo through the valleys, Kane and Sarah prepared for whatever came next, knowing they had already won the only victory that truly mattered. The truth was out, and no amount of government secrecy could put it back in the box.